Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday, and thanks for joining us for episode 54 of Save You a Seat. Today, we are going to be talking about various tips and tricks for the SoftPro Standard edition of software. We're joined today by Jessica Ames, our SoftPro Senior Trainer, who's done a few episodes for us now, and she's going to run through all of the tips and tricks for you today. Just as a reminder, as always, today's webinar will be recorded and it will be published on our blog after the webinar ends today. So if you want or need to, you can revisit the information from today or share it with any colleagues who weren't able to attend live with us. And before we jump in, I just wanted to give you a reminder that SoftPro is celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We have some raffles and giveaways going on throughout the year, some monthly ones, some quarterly giveaways, and one kind of grand prize giveaway that'll be happening in October. So be sure to check it out. You can find all the information at this URL, softprocorp.com/40th anniversary. So visit that at any time to check out the giveaways and make sure you don't miss out on any of the fun. And Jessica, I will go ahead and pass it over to you now, and we can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Ellen. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Like Ellen said, my name is Jessica, and I am a trainer here at SoftPro. I've been a trainer here for almost 7 years. It'll be 7 years this summer coming up. And I really love doing training. It's so much fun to work with not only new customers, but also our existing customers and teaching them new things about what the software can do that can just, kind of help out your everyday lives at work, right, or our everyday business. So that's kind of what this Saved You a Seat is geared towards, is tips and tricks, right? What can help us in our everyday lives. So just to give a little kind of synopsis here of what we're going to cover. So during our tips and tricks class, we're going to cover some keyboard shortcuts, some ways that we can more quickly move through our files. We're going to talk about the concept of overlay, just in case anyone is not aware that we can overlay information from one file to another. We also can overlay templates that we create. So we're going to go through that. Then we're going to focus all of our attention on funding. What are the tips and tricks that can help us fund and stay in balance so that we're not making a whole bunch of changes on the back end when it comes to cutting checks, posting in deposits and wires. What kind of tools, what kind of tricks do we have within the Proform file that can really help us in being balanced, staying in balance, and then very quickly dispersing. So that is going to be our agenda for today. So we are scheduled here for about an hour. And that time does allow for questions. So like Ellen said, please go ahead and submit any questions that you have throughout today's session. There is a section on your GoToWebinar control panel that you can send in questions to. So Ellen's going to be monitoring those. If she feels like she wants to pop in and ask, a question, if it's on the topic we're talking about, she can pop in. Otherwise, at the end of today's session, we'll kind of go back, review all those questions, and then go over all of the answers. All right. So I'm going to be doing this demonstration, FYI. I'm going to be doing this demonstration today in SoftPro Enterprise. SoftPro Enterprise and SoftPro Standard are very similar. So those of you that are standard users and or enterprise users, don't worry, we've got you both covered. I'm just going to happen to be demoing this in the enterprise version, and then I will point out if there's any little differences, how we do it differently between standard and enterprise. But everything we should cover today is going to be applicable to whether you are a standard user or an enterprise user. So we're going to start out first with some keyboard shortcuts, right? These keyboard shortcuts are going to help us navigate the file, and they're going to apply to all of us, whether we are using the SoftPro Standard Edition or the SoftPro Enterprise Edition. The number one shortcut I want to point out is the F1 function key. So whenever we are working in Proform, or if we're working in ProTrust, and we want to access the SoftPro Help website, we can easily access that website by going to the Help menu in our application. We can click on Help and then choose Help Topics. But there's also a keyboard shortcut that will do the same thing. And the great thing about the keyboard shortcut is, what if I have a question on a particular screen? Let's say I've got my loan funding and ProTrust screen open, and I have a question about a certain field on this screen or how something works, and I want to access that help website. Of course, I can close the screen, go to that help menu. But with that keyboard shortcut, I can instead just hit F1 on my keyboard, and it will launch the help website. And specifically, it doesn't just launch the website, it takes you to that exact topic. So it takes me to the topic of loan funding and ProTrust and explains to me what every single field or radio button or drop down list on that field does. And this is probably going to give me a pretty good idea of what my question is. It can also link you to certain videos that we have posted on our help website and or certain job aids. A job aid would be like a handout form that you can print out that'll walk you through step by step, how to perform a certain function. So that F1 function key is a great keyboard shortcut to know, because it is going to take you to that help website and specifically to the topic. Now, just the website in general, for those of you not familiar, typically if I go through the help menu, I'm going to land on this welcome page. And the welcome page is also a great starting off point for me to navigate the site. The application resources are broken down into categories: ProForm versus ProTrust versus Pro 1099, for example. So if I go into, say, the ProForm topic, it's again further broken down into topics. If I have questions about the title screens, if I have questions about the escrow screen, CD versus HUD, if I just have general questions about the general tab, getting started in my file, creating my new files and my templates. So you can browse these topics and find either videos or handouts that can be very helpful if I'm not as familiar in the system, or maybe I'm new to the system, or maybe I'm doing something that I've never done before and I want a little bit more information on it. The site can also be searched. So up in the top right-hand corner, there's going to be just a general search field where we can do a keyword search. If I want to search everything about lookup tables, if I want to search everything about templates, if you type in a keyword, let's do template, and hit that search button or hit enter, then it's going to give you a list of all the topics, all the different pages on this website that reference that word template. So this is a great way to get more information about using ProForm without having to call SoftPro support. Of course, our support team is always there to help you no matter what. If you're looking for a quick answer, maybe the website can be a little bit quicker for you to get that immediate answer on something you have a question about. The next keyboard shortcut I want to talk about is F2. So we're going to focus on the function keys first. So the function keys are at the top of our keyboard. So we start with F1. The next function key we have is F2. So in ProForm, what does F2 do? So F2 will always clear any red text. As we're working throughout our ProForm file, when we look at our different screens, we're always going to see certain text that shows in red and then other text that shows in black. The difference between those two is that red text is user entered. A person went into the system, went into that file, and then typed that text. That's why it shows in red. Any text that shows in black is something that the system, the file, has generated for you. It's something that is calculated based on something else. It's something that is pulling from a different screen. So the reason those two separate colors are important is because the red text never updates on its own. It requires a person to go into that field and then change that data. However, the black text will automatically update. So how does our F2 function key come into play with this red versus black text? Anytime we want to eliminate or clear or get rid of red text, the key that we will use to do that is F2. So let's say, for example, my settlement date I have set as May 10th. And then I come in and also change my disbursement date. Currently, my disbursement date is in black text. It's automatic. It's something the system has calculated. But that doesn't mean I can't manually change it. Maybe we're going to close on the 10th, but we're not going to disperse, let's say, until the 11th. I can manually change that date. If I want to then clear that date, maybe we're told today that we're going to disperse on the 11th, and then 2 hours later we're told, nope, never mind, we're still going to disperse on the 10th. If I want to clear out, delete, eliminate that date of 5/11 as my disbursement date, and specifically I want to bring back that automatic text that was there before, I want that field to revert back to that automatic text, I can clear that field using the F2 function key. I'm not going to have to use my backspace to delete the whole date. I'm not going to have to manually change the date from the 11th to the 10th. If I just click in the field and hit F2, it will clear all of that red text with one simple keystroke. And then when I move my cursor, it'll pull in that automatic black text that was there before. So it's kind of like a reset. It deletes, clears all red text. And if that field happened to be an automatic field where there was automatic text coming in prior to me making a manual change, it resets. It brings back that automatic text. Now, a little side note here, one of the things about the red versus the black text, some of you may be thinking, well, I don't see red in my order. I don't see red in my file. I see blue, I see purple, I see green. So we actually have the option to change our red text to a different color. If you're someone who the text is red and you don't like the color red, and you're wondering, well, how do I change that? Or maybe you have a different color and you want it to be red. The way that we change that text color is by going to our tools menu. So I'm going to go to my tools menu here at the top of the screen, and I'm going to scroll down to preferences. Preferences is where we set some preferred behavior within our ProForm files, and one of which is what we call the type like color. So whether we're in either standard or enterprise, we're going to be able to change that red text to a different color. So when I click the type like color button, it will give me the option to change that text to blue, to green, to purple, to pink. You do not want to change the text to black. If everything shows in black, then I don't have a way to tell the difference between what is something entered by a person versus what has been automatically done by the file, what's automatically been done by ProForm. But you can change your text to any other color other than black. I do see a lot of users, they like to use this bright blue color. They find it easier to see on their computer screen rather than the red color. I've also seen a lot of purple, again, because it's a little bit easier to see. It's a little bit darker on the screen than the red color is. But this is my option to go ahead and change the color of that, what we call red text, to a different color. So again, that's tools and preferences. So for those of us that use lookup tables a lot, lookup tables are available for, let's say, our contacts. If I go to my lender screen, my lender contact names and addresses, there is essentially a Rolodex where I can save those names and addresses to for those lenders that I use on a regular basis. Anytime I see a lender lookup code field, I know that that indicates to me that there's a lookup table available, and the way that we access that lookup table is with the keyboard shortcut. So hopefully all of us know the keyboard shortcut for lookup tables is F9. So with my cursor in that lookup code field, I hit F9. You can also use Control L. That's also another keyboard shortcut that will look up your lookup tables. Now, one thing I always wish I had, right, is spell check, right? Can I just do a spell check of my file? I am notably not the best typer, especially when I'm doing training. I make a lot of typos. Can I run a spell check within the file? So we absolutely can run a spell check. We can use a keyboard shortcut anywhere, any screen, any field. If you ever want to run a spell check, the keyboard shortcut for that is F7. So with your cursor in any field and you hit F7, it will run a spell check of that field. Now, the spell check can also be run in what we call scrollable fields. Let's say we're on our property screen, something like our legal description field. This is what we call a scrollable field because it does have a scroll bar on the little right-hand side. So if I had a very long, lengthy description, I'd be able to have the space to type out that description without running out of room. I'd be able to then scroll through that. So we've got kind of two layers of keyboard shortcuts here. With any scrollable field, any field that has a scroll bar, it can be, number one, expanded. You can open up that field and make it larger, especially when you're typing out a very long legal description. If you don't want to have to scroll through it line by line to do your review or do your typing, you can open this field up and make it larger. The keyboard shortcut for that is Control Z, as in zebra. That opens up this thing called your scrollable field editor. Once the scrollable field editor is open, you can, of course, type, make changes, do whatever you need to do. And there is a check spelling button. So most of us tend to think that this is the only place that you can do a spell check, and that's not true. Yes, we have a spell check button available in our scrollable field, but we also have that keyboard shortcut of F7. So with your scrollable field editor open, you can hit check spelling. It'll run a spell check. If I don't have the scrollable field open and I still want to run a spell check, I can just hit F7 and it'll do the same thing for me. So that spell check works in our scrollable fields as well as our non-scrollable fields, anything like property address, buyer name, seller name, lender name. It'll work anywhere throughout your file. All right, so let's go back to our file number, settlement date, and notes screen. So to move back to that screen, we can either just double click on the name of it, but another keyboard shortcut we can use when navigating our screen list is page up and page down. So page down will move you down your list of screens one by one. I don't have to close the screen that I'm currently in, double click to open the next one. If I want to move up and down the list, I can use page up and page down. The keyboard shortcut in any date fields is going to be Control D. So let's say that I'm working on an order, working on a file, and I need to just throw in today as a settlement date. I'm working on a last minute HUD, I'm working on a last minute CD, we're going to close today. Of course, we can always type that date, no problem. But the keyboard shortcut, Control D, will put in today's date into any date field throughout either Proform and also ProTrust. If we think about posting transactions in ProTrust, cutting a check, posting a transfer. If you just want to throw in today's date, Control D is your keyboard shortcut for that. Also on this file number, settlement date, and notes screen is our notes. Order notes can be used to list out any sort of information we want to keep as a note within the file, anything that's important either to myself or to any other of my users that are going to be working in the same file. If you want to tag your notes with a date and timestamp so that we can keep track of when a note was added, the day, the time, and also the user who added that note, we do have a keyboard shortcut for that. Anytime you hit Control A in a scrollable field, so my notes field is one of those scrollable fields. It can be expanded. We're not going to run out of room. When we hit Control A, it'll put in the current date, the current time, and also the name of the user. So we can use that as a way to basically track and organize our notes. So we know when they were added and who in our office added that note. When it comes to saving our file, a quick and easy way to save the changes we make in our file is going to be going to our toolbar and clicking the save icon. We can also go to our file menu and choose save from there. But our keyboard shortcut of Control S is another very quick and easy way to save the changes you make into your file. When it comes to printing, a quick and easy way to just open up that Ready Doc selection window to send documents to your printer, Control P. Any of these keyboard shortcuts you're used to using in a Microsoft-based program, something like Outlook or Microsoft Word, Control P for printing, Control S for saving. Those same keyboard shortcuts are going to work here in ProForm. Anytime I want to copy and paste, Control C for copy, Control V as in Victor for paste. When it comes to moving through fields, let's say I'm working from my Express order entry screen and I want to move field by field. Your tab key will move you. Your mouse will always let you move, right? We can always click in whatever field we want to move into, but if you want to move with your keyboard, your tab key will move you field by field. If you hit Shift and Tab, it'll move you backwards, field by field. When it comes to navigating the CD, for those of us that have tried on our CD page 2, to tab through the columns, you have probably found it doesn't work, right? The CD, especially on page 2 and page 3, these are set up like grids. Unfortunately, in a grid, we can't use our tab key to move left to right, column by column. However, there is another key on our keyboard that will let us move left to right, and that's going to be our Enter key. So Enter will move you. It'll move your cursor from left to right, column by column. Anytime we're working on the CD page 2 grid and we hit our tab key, it moves our cursor down to the next section. All right, so those are the highlights of the keyboard shortcuts I wanted to point out to you guys. Just some little tips to help you kind of navigate through your file a little bit quicker, especially for those of us that are keyboard people. I know I'm a keyboard person. I don't always like to stop and grab my mouse when I need to move to somewhere different. So having those keyboard options available is amazing, right? Now let's move into talking about overlay. So overlay is a function we have here in ProForm where we are able to take information from one file and then basically do a mass copy and paste of moving that information from one file to another. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this file and I'm going to hit New and let's create a new file. So I'm going to create this as a new CD and I'm going to use my default template. Every time we create a new file in ProForm, we always start that file with a template. So when you pick your file type, CD versus HUD, that will dictate which of our default templates is going to be applied. So I'm going to apply my default CDF template. I'm going to click OK to create that file. Now, as of right now, if I open Express Order Entry, this file is pretty much blank. It's going to require me to go ahead and fill out the information. But let's pretend that we're creating this file because it's going to be a refinance. And in doing my searching of the system, I have discovered that the property this refinance is on is the same property we did a purchase transaction for maybe 2 years ago. The same owner, the same property. They're now refinancing. Maybe it's even the same lender they're refinancing with. All that information from that existing purchase file is now relevant to this purchase. If we think about the contacts, the borrower, the lender. The property address hasn't changed. The legal description hasn't changed. If we think about title work, the requirements and the exceptions, there might be a little thing here or there that has changed, but there's probably a lot of exceptions, especially, that are still relevant to the property. So how can I basically move that information from that existing purchase file here into this new refinance file? So that is where overlay is going to be our best friend. So when we have a file open, we can go to our file menu and choose overlay file or template. On our toolbar, there's also an overlay icon right to the left of your search icon. You've got your overlay file or template option. And what that's going to do, either from the file menu or from the toolbar, it's going to allow you to browse your system. You can browse for a ProForm file. You can browse for another existing template. When I'm browsing, what I want to pay attention to, number one, is this file type dropdown. Our ProForm files and our ProForm templates have different extensions. A ProForm file has an extension of .pfd, ProForm data files. Templates have an extension of PFT, ProForm template. So depending on what you're looking for, you want to make sure you've got the right file type set. You also want to make sure you're in the correct folder. When we look at the file path, most of us are set up that our ProForm files are in a folder called data. Our templates are in a separate folder called templates. So we want to pay attention to those two things. Am I looking for a template? Am I looking for an existing ProForm file? So in our example, we're going to look for an existing ProForm file. Of course, I would need to know what that file name or file number is, which I could do a search for if I wasn't sure what the name or number was. Let's say, for example, this file here is the one that I want to do the overlay of. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that. File ending in 335. Click open, and it's going to then execute the overlay. So as long as I want to overlay all information from the old file into the new, I'm going to click OK on this window that pops up. And that's going to allow that information to overlay from that old file here into the new. So if we now open up our Express Order Entry screen, all my information is filled in. From here, I can then make whatever changes I need to, right? If this is a refinance, obviously I'm going to choose my transaction type as refinance. I'm going to delete out my seller and my sales price. So we know that F2 function key, right? If we think back to our keyboard shortcuts, F2 is the quick and easy way to eliminate red text. So I'm going to eliminate my seller address, all using my F2 function key. I'm going to change my transaction type to refinance. So I can go through and then make any changes necessary. I can F2 clear out my agents, right? If there's no real estate agents here in this refinance transaction. I can F2 clear out my settlement date and then put that in based on what the new date is going to be. So that's a very quick and easy way to basically make a mass copy of an existing order here into a new order. And that's the overlay function. You can use that overlay function for templates as well. Anytime that we create a new order, if we go back to new file, it's going to pull in that default template. We have the ability to browse and choose a different template that we want to overlay or start this order with. So let me go to my templates folder, and let's say I want to start with this custom fidelity template. I'm able to start the order with that fidelity template right from the get-go. But what if I forget, right? So what if I create this order with the default CDF template, and then I realize after the fact, oh, wait a minute, I was supposed to use that fidelity template. Or maybe I have a lender template. I didn't realize that this was the lender involved in this transaction. I want to now pull in that lender template. That overlay function can assist in that scenario. we can go to the overlay icon. Just like we can overlay a file, we can also go into our templates folder and we can overlay another template. It'll pull in the information associated in that template. Yes.
Quick question on this. Someone's asking, when you overlay, it does not carry over the register items, does it?
No, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
It just carries over the data. No money information is going to be pulled in. Any checks that were cut, balances, things like that. Just the data. It will pull in the CD information if you allow it. So you can delete out any old fees if you pull in that old existing CD data in terms of fees and numbers, but it won't pull in anything from the registers or from ProTrust. Good question. All right, so with that said, with that easy transition here, let's talk about funding. Since we're talking a little bit about money. So what are our tools, our tips, our tricks for having a smooth, easy funding scenario here within our files? So number one, at the bottom of Proform, anytime you're working in a file, in your status bar, you're always able to see your file balance. So the status bar is always at the bottom of the screen. Over towards the left-hand side, you're going to see a running total of cash from buyer at the moment, proceeds to seller, and then ultimately what your file balance is. We want to keep that file balance at 0. If your file balance is not at 0 and you're having trouble figuring out what the problem is, in your CDF and HUD tabs, you do have a screen called File Balance Information. This screen can be helpful. It can give you hints and clues as to where it thinks you should go to correct your mistakes. So it's always a thing that is worth checking if your file is out of balance and you're having trouble by just staring at your CD and figuring out why. So that screen, File Balance Information, is a great tool. When it comes to balancing with the lender, let's go to our General tab. We do have a loan funding screen. This screen is where we put in our loan amounts. It's where we put in loan information such as the loan type, the loan products, the loan number. But this screen is also great for funding because we do have our funding type options, gross versus net. When I choose the applicable funding type, based on how my lender is going to fund the transaction, how they're going to fund the loan, this will help keep me in balance. When I choose gross funding, the funding amount is going to be equal to the loan amount. When I'm preparing my CD or when I'm preparing my HUD, a disbursement will be generated back to the lender for any lender fees. However, when I choose my funding type as net, that means the lender is going to take whatever loan fees they are, they're going to deduct them from that original loan amount, and they're going to send us a difference. When I let the system calculate that, I can use that number that it calculates to determine whether I'm in balance with my lender or not. That funding amount we should be leaving in black text. Black text is what's automatic. Black text is what the file can calculate. If I override that number in red, and that happens to not be the correct funding amount, that's going to cause me balance issues. Leaving that number in black and then using the codes on our CD or HUD will allow us to stay in balance. So what are the codes? If we move over to our CD, page 2, and we look at section A, because I said my lender is net funding, the DS code, which stands for Disbursement Status Code, is the letter D. And this is a drop-down list, so if I click in it, it gives me a drop-down. That letter D stands for deducted. Anything we add to the CD, and we mark it with that letter D disbursement status code, those are the fees. Those are the items that are going to be net funded from the loan amounts. If my lender is gross funding, so let's go back to our general tab. Let's go back to our loan funding screen, and let's mark our funding type as gross. Now, when I look at page 2 of my CD, section A, those loan fees are marked with the letter L. The letter L stands for lender. Anything we mark with the letter L is a check. It's a disbursement to our lender. So those are the differences between those two codes. Is the lender net funding that loan fee? Does the lender want a check for that loan fee? We're going to use those two fees accordingly. Because Section A is a loan section, whenever you add a fee description, let's add an origination fee. I don't have to stop and choose the code manually. The code will pull in based off of the funding type. With my file set as gross funding, it pulls in the letter L. If I go back to my general tab, change my funding type to net, and now go back and look at Section A on page 2, it pulls in the letter D for deducted. So you can let Section A pull in that disbursement status code based on your funding type. In a section like Section B, we're going to have to manually choose the code. The reason we have to manually choose the code is because Section B could be loan fees, but it could also be title fees. It could be a random invoice for paying a survey, a pest inspection. It could really be anything. So letting the text come in automatically, letting the code come in automatically allows the file, when we change the funding type, to also change the code automatically. So Section A will pull in that code based off of your funding type. So that is another easy way to help you stay in balance with your lender. You know, especially if the lender's net funding everything, anything associated with the loan will be marked with that letter D for deducted code. Anything marked with the same disbursement code does get lumped together, right? Anything with the letter D gets lumped together as something that's deducted. Anything paid to the letter L, those are fees paid to the lender in a check. So when it comes to balancing with the lender, another great tool that we have to help us kind of figure out, especially if we're off with our lender wire amount, you know, where did we go wrong? What did we enter in differently? What did we enter in wrong? Another great tool is one of our documents. So over in our Ready Docs, under the SoftPro Ready Doc tree, I'm going to go and open up my escrow and closing folder, CDF documents. We've got our file balance sheet. So this document is great for seeing a list of all disbursements, and we can double click to open it to do a preview. But specifically when it comes to balancing with the lender, it's going to give us our final wire amount from our lender here in the incoming funds. But then under disbursements, it gives us an itemized list of everything that we marked with that letter D for deducted. So especially if you can get the lender to send you their own breakdown, you can compare the two and you can maybe see where you went wrong, right? Where you're off. So the other benefit of pulling up the document is that you've got the hot spots. Let's say, for example, we have our underwriting fee in there as $350. Now that we're looking at the lender wire breakdown, it was supposed to be $360, $370. We made a typo, we made a mistake. So I can use that shortcut. I can use that hotspot. Go ahead and click on that underwriting fee blue text. I can change the dollar amount. Let's change to $360. And then once I close the screen that pops open, it immediately updates that loan funding amount here on the balance sheet as well as in the file. If I see something the lender's not net funding, let's say, for example, the credit report or the appraisal fee they want to check for. So I'm going to click on appraisal fee. If the lender wants a check for this, I'm not going to use that letter D disbursement status code. If I need a check payable to the lender, I'm going to pay that to the L disbursement status code for lender. That's going to, again, update my balance sheet so that I've got a check payable to the State Bank of Florida now for $450. All right, so back to that loan funding and ProTrust screen. Some other helpful tools here, specifically for those of us using Standard. So for those of us using the Standard edition of ProForm, when it's time for us to disperse, we're going to do an export. We're going to export the CD data from ProForm into ProTrust. And when we do that export, we typically get a generic deposit that's created. And that deposit consists of all money that we're ever going to receive from anybody, right? Could be lender, could be buyer, could be agent, could be grandma, anybody. We do have this checkbox, separate ProTrust deposit. So for those of us using Enterprise, we disperse here in ProForm. So that's why that checkbox is grayed out for us. Our deposits are already split up. But for those of us that are doing the export into ProTrust, you can check the box separate ProTrust deposit so that when you do your export, you will, instead of one generic lump sum deposit, see two. You'll see one incoming deposit for the funds coming from your lender, and then you'll see a separate deposit for any other money, money from the buyer, earnest money from the agent, money from the seller, if that happens to be a thing for this transaction. So that is a good tool we have here in the ProTrust screen. Another great tool that we all have is what if the buyer brought too much money to closing? I don't want to have to manually figure out what their refund is going to be, based on buyer cash to close versus what they actually brought to the closing. If I look to the status bar, I can see if my CD is done at this point, this is my cash from buyer. Right now I'm at $124,002.96. But what if the buyer just brought in a check or they just sent a wire in the even amount of $125,000? Maybe they brought in $130,000. If I put that dollar amount here and the buyer brought too much money to closing field, that's going to allow either my register in Enterprise or my ledger, if I'm using Standard, account for and create that pending refund check automatically back to my buyer. It sets up the incoming funds of exactly what I'm going to receive. And then it also creates that refund back to my buyer contact. So that is a great tool we have here on this loan funding and ProTrust screen. Yes, we need it for the loan amount. We need it for the funding type, the loan information, but there are other great tools here that we can use to help us fund and stay in balance. Now, if we go back to our CD and go back to those disbursement status codes, I'm going to go to CD page 3, and I'm going to scroll down here to this escrow I added. So I added an escrow for repairs. This is money I'm going to hang on to for a while. Right now, the disbursement status code is set as the letter S, which is separate check. When I go to disperse, this will be a pending check that I can go ahead and cut. What if I want to put it on hold, right? I know I'm not going to want to cut that check right away. I want to go ahead and put that money on hold. If you scroll down to the bottom of your disbursement status code list, you do have the letter H, and that is for held checks. If there's anything you want to put on hold, you can mark it with that letter H instead of that letter S for separate check, so that when you do go to print your pending checks, you don't accidentally issue this check when you intend to hang on to it. So that is a great little tip so that you don't spend money you don't want to. When it comes to cutting checks, we also all have what are called flex checks. So when we look at our CD and HUD tabs, we have two screens labeled flex checks. you have up to 25 flex checks that you can set up. Flex checks are a great way to combine disbursements together that don't have their own disbursement status code. Those flex checks are also a great way to make edits to disbursements separate from your CD. So let's do the first example. Let's do how do we combine items together. So let's go back to CD page 2. I'm going to scroll down here to section H. I've got my real estate commission on line 1 going to Century 22, but they also have a transaction fee, and I need to put that on a separate line. When I look at my disbursement status codes, my real estate agents do not have a unique code, because remember, if I give something the same code, it groups together the same disbursement. But when I look at those lettered codes, I don't have a code for my listing agent, but I do have my flex checks. So I can use a flex check number to combine those disbursements. So let's say I want to send this transaction fee to flex check number 1, and I also want to send the real estate commission to flex check number 1. By sending those to the same flex check, that groups those two fees in one disbursement. So that's one check I can cut versus one wire that I can send. So if I go to my flex check screen, I have that one disbursement. So when I go to my register or when I export to ProTrust, I will have one check to Century 22 rather than having two. If I now need to take that check and break it down, maybe of that $22,795, X amount of money goes to the brokerage, Century 22, Y amount of money goes directly to the agent. Flex checks is also a great way for me to take a disbursement and then break it down into separate checks. Let's say I want to take out, we'll say $10,000. So I'm going to do a minus $10,000. Not plus, let's do minus. That's going to reduce my disbursement to Century 22 to $12,795. Now I have $10,000 to play with. I can come down to line 2, create another separate check, let's say to my listing agent directly, Leanne Lister, for her piece of the commission. And she's getting that $10,000. So you can use flex checks to break down your disbursements prior to doing your export, and also prior to getting into your register if you're using Enterprise. This is totally separate from the CD. It's not going to be changing what my CD looks like or how it prints. It's just setting up my checks for when I need to disperse. There's also a screen right above our flex checks, and that screen is called Group Disbursements. Anything that's already been grouped together based on the disbursement status code will show here on my group disbursement screen. Let's say, for example, all the fees coming to myself as settlement agent, right? Anything we pay to that A disbursement status code, it's all grouped together. So that could be my premiums, my closing fee, my courier, wire fee, right? Whatever I pay to myself as settlement agent. If I need to edit that disbursement, here from the group disbursement screen, I can send that disbursement to a flex check so that I'm able to then break it down and make edits. So my DS code right now is S for separate check. And let's send that to, we'll do flex check number 4. So that now when I go to my flex check screen, I can again edit that money. So maybe I want to, let's say, deduct $20 because I need an extra $20 for recording fees. Come down to line 5, create a separate check, let's say to my county recorder, county clerk. We'll say for recording fees, we'll say $10. Then I want to create another separate check for the remaining $10 to my buyer. We charge them $10 to extra, let's say, for wire fees. I'll create a separate check for $10. So I'm setting up all of my disbursements here before doing my export or before going into my register. So flex checks are a great way to edit those disbursements totally separate from your CD. All right, so we're getting close to the end of our time, and I want to definitely leave some time for questions. So I will go ahead and stop there. Ellen, do you have any questions that have come in that we need to discuss, we need to go through?
Thanks, Jessica. We did have one question that came up back when you were talking about keyboard shortcuts. It was, which consonant will open the scroll field with the control key?
Z is in zebra.
Z is in zebra. Okay, perfect.
Yep, the last consonant of the alphabet.
Perfect, got it. Other than that, we covered most of the other questions. We did get a couple of questions on if we have a keyboard shortcut document that we can make available, which correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that we do have one.
Yes, we do. And it's on the help website. So if we use that keyboard shortcut of F1 and we launch that help website, when you're on the welcome screen, if you click on the ProForm application resources and then click the first topic, getting started, that's where you'll find our list of all keyboard shortcuts. And so you can print this out, you can download it and save it to your computer, but it will list every function key that has a shortcut, as well as every control plus a letter key. So this is your list of all keyboard shortcuts that can be used in both ProForm and ProTrust. And that's on the help website in that ProForm section under getting started.
Perfect. Yes, we will likely also link to this document in the blog recap from today's episode. So it's easy to reference there as well, but perfect that they can find it on F1 Help.
Right, it's always good to go out to F1 Help, just even, maybe you're going out there for the keyboard shortcut list, and then you might stumble across something else that's like, ooh, I didn't know I could do that, or ooh, I didn't know I could do this. So it's a great website to just kind of browse. So like Ellen said, we'll put the link for it in the recording, right, the recap email. But it's also, when you get to the website, go ahead and browse. Go ahead and look around and see what else is available.
Yep, perfect. A couple more questions came through. Do the license number and NMLS number save? All my realtor and lender info auto-populates, but the license numbers I have to re-enter.
Okay, so that would just be changing the structure to your lookup table. So we do, again, have a handout on the help website about editing the structure to your lookup table. So like if I go, for example, let's say to my real estate agents, if you're adding in their license numbers or NMLS numbers and they're not saving to your lookup table, right? So if I go into my lookup table and I hit insert entry or replace, chances are you don't have those columns in your lookup table. So that would be a matter of adding those columns to the structure of your lookup table. If you need help doing that, you can find a handout on how to do it on the help website, or you can reach out to our support team and they can help you add those columns so that when you update your lookup table and you want to include those license numbers, those columns are available. So when I click this modify table button, this is the structure of your lookup table. If this structure has never been updated since prior to when the CD came out in 2015, that would be the issue. That would be the problem. So our support team can help you, or there's also, you'll find a handout for it on the help website.
Okay, great. And then also someone asked, what is the benefit of using Annotate versus Adobe? Is there
All right,
any?
so Annotate is SoftPro Select. We do not have Annotate in SoftPro Standard or Enterprise. So you are a SoftPro Select user, this webinar does not apply to you.
Good to clarify. We did host an episode for Select users back in February.
Correct, yes.
Which you can find on our blog as well.
Yeah, SoftPro Select, for those of you wondering, SoftPro Select is a different version of SoftPro, and there are different functionality. There's different functionality in SoftPro Select than there is here in Standard Enterprise. Annotation is one of those different things. So if you have questions about annotation, you can reach out to our support team for that.
Okay, perfect. I think that covered it from all of our questions.
Okay, awesome.
All
All
right.
right. Well, I hope you guys benefited from these tips and tricks, right? We always are trying to give you guys information on, how to make your work lives easier. So hopefully you guys found this information informative. So thank you all for joining me.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, Jessica. Really appreciate you running through all of that. And again, just as a reminder, we've recorded today's episode. We'll likely publish it on our blog later this afternoon or tomorrow. And we hope to see you guys on future episodes of Safety of Seat. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.